I guess until you guys get bored of me.
Right, they're 8 o'clock thereabouts, right?
Okay.
You could also go on old time zones and it would technically be 9 p.m.
Let's put it this way, they buy you beer after.
That's right. That's one of the perks.
There's an incentive to quit on time.
Yes. Yeah, we go on.
Okay.
Your tab is on us.
Gotcha. I'll definitely keep that in mind
Good
here.
job, Mike.
Yep, I know the system, it's pizza and beer.
Only when you speak. And not on command like a dog.
Okay,
But we've been speaking.
Chandler, you may want to like collapse the Zoom window thing.
Good idea.
you mean zoom in?
Yes, Michael. Can everyone on the remote hear us okay?
Yep, I can hear y'all.
All right.
Sweet. So before we get too far into this, just a quick idea. How familiar are you guys with offensive security or web application pen testing? You got some experience in it? You do? Okay. Few in here. So throughout this presentation, feel free to interrupt me, ask questions. If something makes zero sense, you're like, what the heck is Burp Suite? What the heck is an HTTP request? Feel free to ask questions because I think there's going to be more value in you guys actually learning what's going on than me just yapping for a while. But to kick things off, we're going to be giving a presentation on exploiting business logic flaws. So these are pretty cool. It's basically a kind of vulnerability in an application where you can make the application, as web application, mobile application, whatever it may be, act in a way that maybe the developer was not intending. We'll be getting pretty deep into that. I call them the hidden weaknesses because a lot of times it's based on making flawed assumptions on user behavior. A lot of times just maybe skip steps in the validation process of how. Yeah, you got a question?
Sorry, it just sounds like you're driving SQL injection. You see that being one of the things you're referring to?
It sounds.
SQL injection, that be one of the things you're referring to?
So SQL injection is a very common injection flaw, and it's related to probably users putting in bad input where they're trying to execute SQL queries that will be triggered to perform queries on the database, possibly retrieving data that should not be retrieved or performing functions that should not be performed. They can relate to business logic flaws. A lot of things we're going to see with this is maybe where an application relies on client-side validation instead of server-side, and you might not be able to put in a SQL injection payload on the client side, but maybe on the server side it would. But yeah, a lot of times you'll see, you have your basic SQL query like select all from where, and you specify the table, and you're pulling that data. Those same queries that you're performing in databases, rather it's MySQL, Microsoft SQL, you can do those same kind of queries within like web application forms or URL parameters, and sometimes those SQL queries can be executed. But what we're going to be talking about today is a little different, but sometimes you can kind of do some weird logical things to execute SQL injection. That's a great point. Cool little frog hacking there. Figured I should include that. So a little bit about myself. My name's Chandler Johnson. I am the OWASP Knoxville Chapter Leader. There's some familiar faces with here. I know most of you were not at the last meet we did, but this is a repeat of the presentation we did on September 24th. OWASP Knoxville was around previously, and then it died out during the pandemic, and we just recently relaunched it. We're hoping to do events probably bi-monthly. Hopefully our next one will be November 19th, where we do a interactive lab doing static code analysis. Still kind of trying to figure out the location on that, but that's in the works. I'm an ethical hacking consultant at Zelvin Security. That is a pen testing firm here in the Knoxville area. Our office is in Farragut. Some of you may have not heard of us. We're pretty new to the area, only been here a few years. But we specialize in pen testing, and I'm kind of on the application side of things, but we do network pen testing, application pen testing, and all your typical services from vulnerability assessments, automated phishing campaigns, stuff like that. I'm a veteran. I spent some time in the Army with the 82nd Airborne Division. I was stationed in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Used to jump out of planes for fun. Now I hack computers. I love the outdoors, as you can see in the picture. That's in Roan Mountain, Tennessee. I I love that place. Previous to Knoxville, I was in Western North Carolina, been here for about a year. Loved it so far, but pretty much anything outdoors is a go-to for me. And probably similar to a lot of you guys, I'm just another nerd, right? I enjoy tinkering with things, love computers, love trying to break them and figure out how they work. I was really tempted to include like maybe a little slideshow of my cat here, like Wes did in his email presentation. Fortunately, I did not do that, but I have a cat named Mongo. But maybe for my next presentation, I'll do that.
Is he big like a database?
Pretty big, yeah. I'm actually trying to put him on a diet.
Look,
I maybe overfeed him a little bit, but
Is this Mongo from, the movie?
Blazing Saddles, yes,
Thank
absolutely. I'm glad someone knew that. So our agenda today, we're going to talk about what is business logic. We're going to talk about the causes of business logic flaws. We're going to be going over exploiting business logic flaws, where we're going to go over some labs that I screen recorded from Portswigger. We're going to talk about how modern security tooling is ineffective. When I refer to tooling, I'm referring to like vulnerability scanners, rather it's doing dynamic scanning or static. So in the application security world, you'll often hear DAST or SAST. That's a dynamic application security testing and static application security testing. So a lot of people want to dynamically interact with an application so they can actually go through all of the requests and use it the way a user would and test it dynamically while it's running. And a lot of other security testing on applications is statically, where someone takes the code and they do code analysis through automated and manual methods. They both have their benefits over the other. Ideally, a combination of the two is ideal. A lot of people call that hybrid. But we're going to talk about how those tools are ineffective at finding business logic flaws. And we're going to talk about preventing these vulnerabilities a little bit, and that's going to be kind of an open discussion. So be prepared for that. Hopefully it's not too much for you guys. And we'll have some time at the end for questions as well. Oh, and most importantly, we're going to have fun times. That's really what's key here. So first off, basic question, right? What is business logic? So business logic is basically a set of rules that defines how the application operates. It's very broad, honestly, and it is kind of a confusing term because you see business in there. But a lot of times we call out business logic vulnerabilities when they're not directly tied to the business of the application or company that's hosting the website. So a lot of times they're often called application logic vulnerabilities or just simply logic flaws. And the OWASP definition is business logic vulnerabilities are ways of using the legitimate processing flow of an application in a way that results in a negative consequence to the organization. So it is a bit broad, but I think you guys are going to figure it out here soon, get an idea of it. So who can find a logical flaw with this pencil here?
To do drugs.
Yeah, is there any issues with this?
Remove the pencil, wear it down, it becomes cool to do drugs.
The pencil can be used as a weapon.
Yeah.
Do drugs.
Do drugs, exactly. If someone were to sharpen this pencil, right, it's going to cut down to do drugs. We do not condone drugs. We don't want to encourage our children to do that. So that is the logical flaw in this pencil, right? Very basic illustration. That is the outcome after you sharpen that pencil. So whoever designed this pencil maybe didn't think that piece through. And as we're looking at these vulnerable web applications, we're going to be seeing kind of the same thing. Like I said, a lot of it is flawed assumptions on user behavior, which I have as the bottom bullet here. But other causes are a reliance on client-side validation. The most basic example I can give on that is, say you're making like a really stupid password, right? Maybe your password is just password all lowercase, and when you try to update your password on this application, it's like you need 12 characters, and you need an uppercase and a number, right? But it doesn't actually submit the request at all. When you actually click submit with your password that says password, it's not actually sending anything to the server. It just instantly rejects your input and gives you the error message that tells you what you need to do in accordance with their password policy. However, if you supply the proper characters for that password policy, that request will go through to the web server, and ultimately your password should be updated. So we failed to make that request on the client side, but on the server side, that should succeed. So if you can skip that client-side validation and send it directly to the server, you might actually be able to set your password to just password. So a lot of times developers create these client-side controls that are very easy to bypass just by sending server-side requests using, proxy tools like Burp Suite or Zap, or using something like curl. You could literally just manually send curl requests server-side. Improper workflow validation, that's going to be things where, say you log into something. There's usually actually a lot of things happening when you log in. You submit a username and password and boom, you're into the application. But if you're actually proxying that traffic, you're going to see there might be a post request for when you submit the username and password. And then there might be another request that does some kind of validation on those credentials. And you might have another request that validates your user role before you ultimately get your session token. Maybe you could drop some of those requests or alter those requests to get into an authenticated state that you shouldn't have. We also have improper data validation. So data validation is a very big topic, especially like what you were saying with SQL injection, right? If you're trying to defend against SQL injection, you want to validate the data that the user is supplying, ensuring that these common SQL payloads are not allowed. There's input validation, there's output validation. That's more specific to like client-side attacks like cross-site scripting, where data is getting reflected. Not going to get into that too much, but a very basic example I can give you of improper data validation would be like you're filling out a form, right? It asks you for your phone number. That form for your phone number, that field, it should only allow probably digits. It should just only allow an integer. So, probably, let's see, 6, 4, 10 characters, right? It should only allow 10 characters as an integer. So if you can put something like, text, a string of text, that is not necessarily a vulnerability, but that is improper data validation. And that might not be a vulnerability in this case of updating a phone number to a string of text, but somewhere else down the line, this could be a big issue. And then, yeah, like I said, or you got a question?
If you were hunting for a client-side validation, and it wasn't just obvious in the HTML, what would you find out in like some JavaScript that's unique to it, or CGI, or where would you look to see if there is some sort of client validation going on?
I think the easiest way to be able to quickly detect if there's client-side validation happening would be just, submitting that data in your browser or attempting to and seeing that nothing happens. And you don't need any special tools for that. You could open up the browser tools and go into like the network tab. In the network tab, you can click like the start record button. It's a little different in all the browsers, but it'll show you the requests that are being made just through your browser tools. And if a request gets made, it's doing server-side validation because you're sending a request to that server. But if nothing happens when you try to say update your password, like you don't see the page like refresh or flicker at all, and that message just instantly appears, it's client-side validation. But I think browser tools are probably the easiest way to quickly figure out if something is client-side or server-side.
I mean, like every password update is going to be client-side.
Yeah.
So technically, a smart way of doing it would be client-side, but also the server-side validation. That's the back end.
Right. And so there's always, a lot of times there's client-side validation, but there's pretty much always server-side validation if you're submitting data, right? So to submit that data, it's probably going to be sending a post request, possibly a put request. When you're retrieving data from a website, like you're going to a certain page, there's typically a GET request. So these are all just different request methods within the HTTP protocol. But when you're actually submitting data, such as the password update, it's probably a post request that's getting sent out. That is the server-side request. The server should validate on that request. But on the client side, nothing is actually getting sent to the web server or anything. It's just controls within the user interface to ensure you're not doing anything too crazy. But the reliance on those controls are a problem, which we'll see here soon. So like I said, these labs are going to be from Portswigger. They have like a little free web security academy where you can make an account and you launch these labs and it creates a unique subdomain for you, completely free. So it's a great place to learn some of this stuff. There's a lot of vulnerable web applications you can practice on, like OWASP Juice Shop, Damn Vulnerable Web App, and there's quite a few others. Those are probably the biggest two. Yeah.
Rich, would you possibly be making these slides available to us?
I can do that. Yeah. I'll coordinate with you, Wes, and we'll figure that out.
Can do that.
Yeah, I can do that. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll just be on etsa.tech at the end of the day.
Okay. Yeah. I'll probably message you tomorrow and we'll figure that out. Yeah, definitely recommend checking out Portswigger if you want to try some of these. It's a One thing I really like about it is they're actually very modern. They're really keeping up with these labs. I think a lot of CTFs lack realism, but Fort Swigger is really on point with like what you're going to see in the real world. So with that said, we're going to go ahead and start going through these, and we're not going to have time to go through all of them, but we're going to get through as many as we can. So first one, very simple. This is like I was talking about where did my mouse go? Here we are. Let me start that over and get it full screen. So yeah, this lab is called Excessive Trust and Client-Side Controls. You resume that. So we're going to try to purchase this jacket here, the lightweight elite leather jacket. As you can see, we're adding it to our cart. It cost $1337, fitting for the name, I suppose. And we have a store credit of $100, right? So we're not going to be able to afford this. So we'll see that when we try to make this purchase.
Is this just like object manipulations?
Spoiler alert. This one isn't. No, we're going to be manipulating the server side request.
Okay.
But as you can see, there's not enough credit for this purchase. But a request does go through when you try this. So when we look at our proxy history, let me pause this just so I can kind of explain what's going on here, because this might be very new to some of you guys. This is just a tool called Burp Suite. It intercepts the HTTP traffic, can also intercept WebSockets and all sorts of stuff, but it's primarily used for intercepting HTTP traffic. Basically gets placed between your browser on the client side, between you and the web server, right? So when I'm making a request for my browser, it goes through this proxy to the web server. So the idea is that I can tamper with these requests and then, maybe send bad input to the web server and try to do things I'm not supposed to. So when we try to purchase this, when we don't have enough funds, it still makes the request. We can see the product ID is 1. So that was the jacket. It was the first item on the page. We would have clicked the second product. It would say 2 here, and so on. Just each product has a unique identifier. We can see quantity is a key parameter here. We're just trying to buy 1 jacket. And then we can see the cost. So 1337.00 for the cents afterward. So the idea here is probably, if you can think about how you would manipulate this request, this one's probably pretty quick to figure out. But if you were to try and purchase this jacket for a cheaper price, what do you think you would tamper with in this request? Yes, the price. So as you can see here, the price is specified with what's in line with the product ID, which is 1337. But if we just simply change that, first I'm sending it to a tool in here called Repeater, so I can manually tamper with that. There's a lot of ways you can do this. This is just my preferred way. The key part is that I'm tampering with this request through my proxy, setting that to 1. And we can see we get a little redirect indicating that the purchase was likely successful for the data altercation. Now it's 1 cent. We place that order and you saw the lab. So that's a very simple case on a business logic flaw. They should be validating that price, right? That price should be tied to that product ID. And it should say, you cannot change this price from 1337, right? So we're going to go into the next one now. So we're going to try to purchase that jacket again in this one, but it's going to be a little different here. So it's in our cart. We have $100 again. It costs $1337. We once again run into the issue where we do not have enough store credit for this purchase. We look at the request here. It's once again a post request to /cart. We're once again going to send this to Repeater to tamper with it. But this one is a little different though, because now we don't have that price. We don't have that price parameter anymore. So how do you think we could manipulate this request if we can't directly manipulate the price?
Change the product ID.
Change the product ID?
Is it a cheaper product?
You could, yes. So if we were to change the product ID, we would end up purchasing a different product. So maybe the second product would be $50, and then we would be able to buy that. But we're trying to target the jacket, which is product ID 1. Where we're going to go after is the quantity. It's going to get a little interesting here, so we'll showcase that. So as you can see, if I send that with the quantity of 1, I sent that with the quantity of 1, and I went back to the browser. We had a quantity of 2. So I'm going to modify this again to -3. So going back here, I refresh this, it went to -1 because previously I set the quantity to 2. We had 2 jackets in our cart. I went to -3. Now we have -1 jacket in our cart. So we have a negative price on this jacket. So hopefully we can purchase it. So we're going to give that a try here, place the order. But we run into an issue. The total price cannot be less than 0. So that's where it gets a little tricky, right? Because it allows negative quantities, which is probably already an issue within the data validation of quantity. Not necessarily like a vulnerability that could be exploited, because clearly we cannot make a purchase if our cart has a quantity less than 0, or the price cannot be less than 0. So this is a little more tricky. But if you were to try in
Multiply by negative fraction.
what was that?
Multiply by a negative fraction, so you get a positive fractional price.
So you're saying manipulate the quantity?
Minus 0.3, let's say.
Yeah. Okay. So you're saying do a fractional quantity so that it doesn't do the 1337 price? Yeah. But you're trying to get the quantity to where it's almost divided, so the price is also divided?
Like point
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Or you can buy another product to get you above 1 cent or something like that.
Yeah.
Or sometimes, I doubt it's the answer in this, but hitting query strings.
Yeah. So within query strings, are you referring to the parameters?
String.
What?
Or hidden parameters in the query string.
Yeah. So the parameters being passed here are in the body of the post request. It was the ID for the product, the redirect point, which is product. That's not too relevant in the quantity. I like the fractional idea, and that kind of thinking is absolutely how you find stuff like this. But the issue you're going to run into is if you try to fractionally divide the quantity, you might be able to, I don't think it's going to accept that input. This is screen recorded. We can't really test that on the fly. But what I would predict that might happen is that probably the quantity would require to be a whole number in order to make that transaction. So we're actually going to walk through this now. It's a little brain teaser. You'll get it as we go through this. But so what I'm doing here is it's okay. We can't have a negative price, but we don't have enough money to have a quantity of 1, right? I'm going to put a positive quantity in to get 1 jacket in my cart. So it's not negative anymore. We now have 1337 as the total cost again. And our store credit is $100, so we still cannot make this purchase. But since we know we can alter the quantity on these products, we can take a different product and do a negative quantity on this product, because we're not actually trying to get this product, but we can keep a positive quantity on our jacket. So that little beer belt I just put in my cart, I'm going to find the request for that in my request history. So it's a post request to cart. Again, you'll see product ID is 10 now, because it's a different product, but I'm going to set the quantity to -15, and this is the number that gets me enough money to purchase the jacket. So when I send that, we get the total cost down to $14, and we can make the purchase getting our jacket. We won't get negative beer belts, of course, but that is how you can kind of abuse that logic to eventually get to the jacket you were going after. Yeah, that's the thing with these logical things. That's why security tooling can't find stuff like this, is because it's very specific and relies on those weird niche things. And I don't know, there's a whole lot of debate on like manual pen testing versus automated tools. And I'm very pro manual testing, like hands-on do it, because that's where you find stuff like this. So we'll go to the next one here.
Can I throw in a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Looking at this with first week,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure would using SSL have protected the server for any of this, or are you guys 100% fine?
So SSL is going to, encrypt the traffic that's going to and from the web server. need a valid certificate for that. There's a whole lot of topic discussion on SSL and, what cipher suites people are using, and whether they're using modern version of TLS, right? Typically, if we see something that is like SSL 3.0 or 2.0, we'd call that out as a vulnerability because those are weaker encryption for the TLS traffic being passed through. But yeah, so with this, that's not going to have an impact on that vulnerability because that's specific to the encryption of the data being passed. Now, that'd be a subject if someone was trying to, maybe they're on the same network as us and they were running like Wireshark and they're trying to crack the encryption on the requests that we're going through. So I'm authenticated here. I'm just trying to abuse the way the application behaves.
Also, where your proxy, where your
Yeah.
proxy key is in there, right? If it's
Right.
And the proxy
Yeah.
is actually local to the device.
So my proxy is local to my device, and it gets like I mentioned, kind of placed between the browser I'm using and the web server that I'm sending the traffic to. But it doesn't impact any other users, right? Because it's to my device. Now, if I was on a network with a bunch of people and I had Wireshark running or something like that, that's when we would start talking about what kind of encryption standards do they have. Because someone might intercept my data and be able to possibly crack the encryption. Typically, post requests are pretty safe as long as modern versions of TLS are being used and some strong cipher suites are being used. But you run into a lot of problems. So like an example where someone might be able to intercept that traffic and still steal your data, even though strong encryption protocols are used, is if, say, those query strings you talked about are passed in like parameters of a GET request, where they're appended to the URL. Whereas these post requests, as you saw, the data was at the bottom of the request. We refer to that as the body of the request. So that data is being protected. It's being encrypted and it's being transmitted, but the URLs that are being sent across the internet and whatnot, those are not safe. So when people put, like username or password as parameters in a GET request, that's where things get pretty dangerous. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for the question. That was a good question. So yeah, here's another lab. This one, we're going to try to get to an admin portal just by appending admin to the URL here. We're going to see that we get a kind of forbidden access. And it says that the admin interface is only available if logged in as a don't want to cry user. Yeah, pretty cool, right? I'm sure a lot of you have heard of don't want to cry. But anyways, we'll take note of that error message and we'll try to figure out how we can get logged in as a don't want to cry user. So we're going to register a new account and we can see if you work for don't want to cry, please use your don't want to cry email address. So I'm going to take note of that as well. And we're going to register a new account.
Can I actually stop you real quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
Previous company I worked for, I'm pretty sure I already know this vulnerability because they just straight up had it on their system.
Yeah.
Giant global corporation, you could go register as their corporate domain on their own website.
Really?
There was no email validation for it.
Wow. So yeah, so registering with someone else's email on the domain.
Yeah.
The scenario here is that after you register, you have to access that email to access the registration link. So, I mean, most forms are going to let you put in whatever email you want. I could go to some bank and say my email is whatever. I could use the bank.
A lot of times you can log in and
yeah.
Can, like validate
So
the email.
yeah, where that would be a big problem, I think, is say you specify your username and password, and maybe you had additional access if you had a corporate email. Mm-hmm. So if you specified that corporate email while you're making your account, and if you only say that you registered that account and you only had to log in using the username and password, now you have that elevated access but never validated that corporate email is yours, be a big problem.
Yep. That's what we saw.
Yeah. So what's happening here? It's a little different. I could totally see that. No.
Yeah. No.
No, that's a good point though. But that's the same. It's the same thing, just not what's in this lab.
Okay.
That's a business logic issue though. Assuming anyone who has that email address gets extended privileges, and then they make an account, they don't have to validate that email they used is theirs, and they can access it. That's a big problem. In the case of this one, we have our own email client, our little attack server here. I'll call it that for the rest of this presentation. Basically anything that goes to this address, regardless of what the subdomain is, will get that email here. So I'm going to copy that email address and I'm going to register an account with it just so I can get the registration link and actually make an account. So put in a little username here, hacker, and paste that email into the form here. And the reason I'm not doing the don't want to cry email address is because I actually have to validate that that email is mine by getting to the registration link in the email. So going to my email client here, if I refresh it, I can see that I get my registration link. And if I navigate to that, my account will be successfully registered. But where the logical flaw comes in and where you kind of have a flawed assumption on user behavior is that after you log in with your newly registered account, you can just go to your account settings and then update your email address. So now I can just, yes. So now we can take that and then.
Very similar.
Yeah. This is just later in the process, right?
So you only validate.
Honestly, yours sounded worse because yours sounded worse than this lab. And that's the funny thing. Like some of these CTFs, you see stuff in the real world that's worse than what you see in CTFs, and it's like, wow, that's pretty bad.
You had many clients who don't verify emails from important accounts.
What was that?
Have you had many clients who don't verify like email addresses for important accounts?
For important accounts.
So like I got bug bounty money because there was a bank in Mexico that I bought a really common placeholder domain and I set up a wildcard email address. And so I was just getting, when people didn't have an email address, they would use this domain and I was just getting like auto login emails to people's bank accounts.
I've never seen that before. I mean, that's how that email client I just used worked, regardless of what the subdomain was used on the email, I would receive it, right? So that's kind of what you're talking about, but I've never actually seen that in the real world, but that's really cool. I've seen that. Wow. Yeah, it's pretty sweet. I haven't seen that. Let's go to the next one here. Let's see, looks like we got 20 minutes left. So, yeah. So I'm gonna try to be a little selective which ones we pick here. All right, we're gonna make some fraudulent purchases again. In the CTF. Yeah, this one has a coupon code. I'm sure you can start guessing some ideas on how coupon codes can be abused, but new customers use a code, NewCust5. That'll get us $5 off on our purchase. You can also sign up for a newsletter, and this will get us another coupon code as well. This is a different coupon code. We sign up for that. We get a coupon code that says sign up 30. That's going to be a 30% coupon. So we have a $5 off and a 30% off. Now let's go ahead and use these to once again try and purchase that 1337 jacket. Same thing as before. This costs $1337. We add it to our cart. We once again have $100 of store credit. So we don't have enough money to purchase this jacket, but we have a couple of coupons, so we can start using those. So if we use NewCust5, we'll get $5 off. That's a start. And if we use the other one, or if we try to use it again, it says coupon already applied, so we can't use it twice in a row. So the idea now is to use the other one, sign up 30, and that gives us 30% off. So we've made some good progress on getting this price reduced. But once again, we can't reuse the coupon. So quick little quiz. Oh, I spoiled it. Never mind. I was going to ask you guys what you would do next. Because what we saw is that it couldn't use the same coupon twice in a row. It says this coupon's already applied. You can't do it again. What it's doing is validating on the last coupon that was used rather than the total amount of coupons used. It's just strictly looking at the last one. So when I tried NewCust5 twice in a row, it said there's a problem. But when I used sign up 30, it let me use that one, so I can use multiple coupons. But when I tried sign up 30 a second time in a row, it said you already have it applied. But it's only validating on the last coupon I applied. So if I use NewCust5 again, It's looking to see, what was the last coupon code he used? See sign up 30? Okay, as long as it's not that one, he can use it. So now the idea here is to just keep alternating between those coupon codes to continuously reduce the cost on that jacket.
To near zero.
Yep, to near, yeah, the cheaper the better, right? Whatever is within our $100 store credit limit. Yeah, anyone have any questions about that one?
I feel like, Chrome such as like Honey and stuff have made this one like almost go away because they'll just sit there and hand out every code on earth.
Yeah, I've never seen those, but a lot of ways people try to abuse coupon functionality. When I gave this presentation last, I didn't completely spoil it right away. I had people guess, like, how would you abuse this? And that's the kind of idea people had. They're going to try to,
thought about that.
yeah, but most people,
Six.
what?
New custom
Yeah.
seven.
Yeah,
That's where my brain goes.
yeah. Or what about like
Yeah. that's what I was
employee
thinking too.
100 something, right? Like,
Coupon buzzing.
Sign
Yeah.
up 99.
yeah, if you go on Google and look up like coupon word list, you're gonna find word lists with like thousands of lines probably of coupon codes that you could just brute force. So I could take that request that's adding a coupon, put that in Burp Suite, and set up, I'd use a tool called Intruder, a little automated attack where it would use a word list to try thousands of coupon codes. So that's definitely like the most common way people will try this stuff. And I think most developers are aware of that. So you're probably going to find more stuff like this. While we're looking at coupon codes, I'm actually going to skip to the last lab because this one's very interesting. So there was a validation issue there. There was a validation issue where it looked at that coupon code and it was only looking at the last one you submitted. It allowed you to use as many coupon codes as you wanted. That's another piece of the validation issue. And that's the problem there. And a lot of times data validation is very obvious when we see those vulnerabilities. But my favorite kind of business logic vulnerabilities are the kinds where you're literally like, you might not even be tampering with the request at all, but there's just something fundamentally wrong with how someone might use a certain functionality. So in this lab, you can buy a gift card and you can also get coupons. Yeah, you already see where it's going. Yeah. So we get up our sign up 30 again to get 30% off, right? But instead of buying the jacket, we're actually going to get the gift card, which is only $10. But if the gift card costs $10, right? And we go to our cart and apply that coupon for 30% off, it's going to bring it down to $7.
That one isn't even a vulnerability technically.
This is not a vulnerability, no, because you're using the application the way it's intended to be used, but the way we're going to leverage this is a scenario that they definitely don't want. So we redeemed that coupon code and now our store credit went from $100 to $103. Now it would be really annoying doing this manually and going through buy, apply coupon, use the coupon you redeemed. But I mean, you can automate this. This is like a little more advanced, but in Burp Suite, you can set session handling rules. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating a macro, and this macro is going to run on every request I make. So like I've been talking with the HTTP request, there's GET request, POST request, whatever. I'm making a macro that's going to apply to any request that I make since it's a session handling rule. Now I'm going to take the flow of requests. So this is post cart. This is buying. This is adding coupon to the cart. We have post cart coupon. That's supplying the sign up 30 coupon. We have checkout. That's when we purchase the coupon. And then we have order confirmation. That's completing the order. And then we have a final post request a gift card. That's where we redeem the coupon that came in. So I'm just creating a macro so that I can automate this. I'm configuring the request where we receive the new gift card coupon. So I specify the parameter for that gift card and I go into the response where the coupon code comes in. I specify this as my essentially placeholder. So when it's running this macro, it's going to know to look exactly there for that value and pick up those values instead of just completing the same flow over and over. Has a little bit of intelligence built into it. And then the final post request where you redeem the gift card, I need it to look at request number 4, the previous one, for that placeholder we specified. And we need to say, hey, that gift card coupon you saw from the last request, we need you to now redeem it in this request. So I'm just getting the order of requests that I want to automate. I run a quick little test macro to make sure it works. I got a new gift card code there, which is different than when I initially did this. And now I can just go on any request. And if I send a request through this proxy, it's going to have that session handling rule to tie that macro to it. And that all of that series of requests is going to be run through. So I just take a random request here, just going to my account, getting your account details. It has nothing to do with this purchase. But since those session handling rules, it'll be run. I do null payloads, basically saying just run this request a bunch of times. 412 times is how much you need to do this to eventually get the amount of store credit you need to purchase the 1337 jacket, because that's the ultimate goal of the lab here. So you can see it's making these requests. It's getting 200 responses back, indicating that the request is successful. And each of those requests is actually going through the flow of the five requests that I have in the macro. So when I come back to the browser here and refresh the page, I can see that it's going through that flow of buying a gift card with a coupon code and then redeeming that coupon code and supplying it on the future purchases over and over until, and then this is sped up, but until I eventually have enough money to get the jacket again. But yeah, like you said, that's not necessarily a vulnerability because we didn't really tamper with anything. We just literally used the application in a way that it probably was not intended to be used, right?
I saw some real life actually.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You've seen coupon code, or you've seen gift cards that allow coupon codes?
No, it was old store in the mall, King George.
Yeah.
Had 50% off. It went in and said, okay, I want store credit cards. Like, you know, give me $100 of store credit.
Yeah.
For $50.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah. Same concept there. Yes. Disclaimer, you guys see gift cards, don't try this. You might get in trouble. See, we got 10 minutes left. I think we can probably go through maybe two more. We will do this one. This one's pretty cool. This one's going to be related to we're once again going to try to access the admin panel, and it's going to tell us the same thing again. It's only available to don't want to cry users. So we're going to register an account, but it's not going to be as simple as registering an account with our email and then updating the email to get the privileges to access the admin portal. This one's a little more complicated, but it'll make sense once we go through it. So we try to go to the admin endpoint. When we get there, it says that it's only available to don't want to cry users. Okay, so we register an account. It says that if you work for Don't Want to Cry, use your Don't Want to Cry email address. So this lab exploits a vulnerability kind of in the, I guess, input validation, the data handling. So we're just going to see how it responds when we do an excessive amount of input. So we're just putting in a whole bunch of letters here, A, B, C, D, E, F, and then G, just a whole bunch of characters to see what it does to this. A lot of times you'll have fields and forms that say maybe a max of 15 characters or so. Sometimes there's no restrictions. It kind of varies, but we're going to try to just put in a huge email address with our attacker domain. So that way we can use our email client to get the registration link. So that worked. We were able to use all that input and receive this link here. So you can see that is the input I just put in, a whole bunch of characters with the email address appended to it. So we registered. I'll log in here, just made the username hacker and the password very secure. And as we log in, this is our account details. Now you'll see the G's get cut off. And we no longer have the we don't have our email domain appended to it anymore. I mean, we know it processed that data. Let me pause it here. We know the web server processed that data because we received the registration link. We saw in our email client it was to all those characters we put in, plus our exploit server email address. But in the application, it cuts off a little bit after the cheese. So when we copy what's present in the application and paste it into our little notepad here, it says 255 characters. So clearly there's some kind of 255 character limit here within the application, but it still allows you to send that request and the web server picks up all the characters you put in. But on the application, it's only picking up the first 255. So what we're going to do to abuse that is we're going to keep our attacker email address here, but we're going to also have a don't want to cry email. And we're going to have the don't want to cry email end at 255 characters. So I need to get this back to 255. That way, that's what the application is going to pick up. But we know it processes more than 255. So that's when I'm going to take my attacker email address. I'm going to append that to the don't want to cry, because that data will come through and I'll get the registration link. But the don't want to cry is going to be the cutoff point in the application, because that's where the 255 characters ends. It's not going to pick up anything after the .com. So
as long as your MX records are valid in this case. As long as you can receive the email.
yeah, as long as you can access that email, you'll be able to perform this. And the application doesn't understand that you just put your attacker email in there. The application just understands that you did the big string of characters with the don't want to cry in it, because it cuts off at the 255. So we ended it there. But they're still processing more than that on the web server. So that's where we can still add our email to get it sent to us. That's when we were able to get into the admin portal, log in with our newly registered account. It thinks it's the don't want to cry user. So now we can get to the admin panel and delete the user to complete that challenge. Any questions on that one? All right, we're going to go through one more. We'll do this one here.
I kind of want to see the authentication bypass too.
Let's see. All right, we're going to do that one. And I think that one's actually going to be good, because this one relates to the, having a hard time remembering what this one is. I think it's related to the workflow, the requests that go in though. Like I said, when you actually get a session cookie on a website, a session token, something that uniquely identifies you, you might have to do a post request with username and password. Then there might be some validation check to ensure it's you and check your user role. Maybe there's like MFA and you have to select your one-time passcode method. Maybe it's like select mobile or email to receive your OTP. And then there's all these requests that can get added into it. If I remember this right, I think it's where we skip some of those validation points. So once again, we're trying to get to the admin endpoint. It says the admin interface is only available if you're logged in as an administrator. So if we try to log in here with the credentials that they gave us for the challenge, we can see we're actually going to intercept it this time. So I know other labs didn't have this. Usually what I've been doing in these labs with Burp Suite, so I look at my proxy history and I send it to a tool called Repeater. That's where I can manually tamper with stuff and only just send one request at a time. That's kind of the way I prefer to do things. But what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to intercept the traffic and capture it live and alter it before it gets sent to the web server. And that's due to the workflow of requests that go through here. And it'll make sense here in a second. So when I log in, my browser will hang because, like I said, I'm intercepting it. So before it gets sent to the web server, it has to go through my proxy, and it's not going to get sent until I click forward, indicating that I'm happy with the request. So I click login, and this is the request here. It's a post request to the login endpoint. Let me just kind of show the details in that. So we can see it's a post request to login. There's a CSRF token. There's a username and the password we supplied. This is in the body of the post request, so it's being transmitted safely. That's good. When we submit that request, we don't get a session immediately. So it also sends a request, and you don't see this in your browser. You only see this when you're intercepting it. It's doing another request for get role selector. So that's where it's looking at the credentials you supplied, and it's saying, what is the user role of this person? And it's going to go from there. So it's going to retrieve that endpoint with the get request. We click forward. We're going to look at what this looks like in our browser. So we can see that we're being asked to supply a role. I believe if we expand that, I don't recall if that's recorded in here or not, but there's user, and I believe that was the only option on the dropdown. And when you submit that request with user, you can see that that is a parameter. I removed it, but it said user on role. That was a parameter being passed on the validation here. Now we know that to access the admin portal, we have to sign in with an administrator account. So the obvious thing to try when we're intercepting that is to just change the role to something that says administrator. See if we can just kind of privilege escalate ourselves that way. Spoiler alert, this doesn't work. I just showed this because it's the very obvious thing to try. So when you forward that request, get redirected to kind of the home page, and we try to log in. And we have a session because we supplied our credentials, but we didn't actually get the administrator role, as you saw, by tampering with that parameter. So we're going to have to try something different. So we're going to go through this flow again, supply the credentials, and we're going to intercept it. And we log in. So now when we view the intercepted traffic, I forward the request, submit the credentials, and get our role selector again. But this time I drop the request. And now I'm going to turn intercept off. It says request was dropped by user. And now I'm going to go to the admin endpoint. And now we have access to that. Now that's probably going to be very confusing if you've never kind of interacted with web applications like this before. But essentially what's happening is you have that GET request that said role selector, and that's bringing you to the pop-up where you select your role. Like I mentioned in that dropdown, I believe user was the only option available. So the idea for me then was to try and tamper that input, tamper with the role, put in say administrator to try privesk. That didn't work. But the way to actually bypass that role validation is to just drop the request and not send it to the server side. You could almost think of this as like a macro, kind of like what I showed in the session handling rules. This is a flow of requests that you have to go through while you're authenticating into the application. But if you just completely drop the role validation request and don't send that to the server, it gives us the administrative privileges. Now, why does it do that? We don't have the full context of that within this lab. My guess is that when you're dropping that request and it can't be validated by your input, it's probably looking in the database at the user roles alphabetically. I'm guessing administrator is the first one that it sees, and it gives you those roles. I've seen business logic vulnerabilities or other types of attacks where you can kind of drop certain required input and it might default to something. And if that is alphabetical, there's a chance it could be admin or administrator. So they don't give us like the code here to review and figure out why that works or why that happened, but that's my assumption. And yeah, we get into there and you delete the user Carlos, and that's the completion of that lab. But yeah, those were all ForceRigger labs. We didn't get to go through all of them, which is all right, but it's a great tool. I think there's about 250 different labs. So they're all very realistic. All that stuff we showcased is stuff you'll see in the real world, which I really like about it, because a lot of CTF stuff, that's not always the case. Go back to our little slideshow here, though. Really cool other research you can do is looking at bug bounty reports. So even though I'm telling you ForceRigger is great, has some realistic labs, it still at the end of the day is not the real world. You actually want to see this stuff in real world, and you're not working in an offensive security role, but you want to learn more about it. Look at what bug bounty researchers are doing. I know you mentioned bug bounty, and it's a super cool way to learn some of this stuff. A lot of these programs you can sign up for free and do it yourself, and you can be in scope to actually try these on your own. It's very competitive. You might not find any vulnerabilities, but it's pretty cool. And tools like, or platforms like HackerOne, some of their bug bounty partners allow disclosure on their reports of vulnerabilities. So security researchers find something cool, they get paid a bounty for it. Sometimes they can even disclose it on the platform and show everyone how that vulnerability was performed and exploited. But yeah, there's some other ones. This is BugCrowd. Forgot what this one's called. I think it's called like Invicti or something. And then there's Synac. Yeah, they're great. You can see the proof of concepts on the disclosed reports. And another cool thing about bug bounty is, like I said, it's pretty competitive because, like I said, it's a bunch of people trying to hack the exact same thing. And everyone's trying to find the vulnerability so they can get a payout. It's especially prevalent in like foreign countries where, you know, they can't find a job for getting paid on the US dollar, right? People in foreign countries can get US dollar payouts doing programs like these. So they're very competitive out there with that. And you get to see some very sophisticated techniques. So if you look up like business logic flaws by the CWE category on there and filter your results to that, you can find some really cool write-ups. This is just a search I did on there for ones that were disclosed within that category. Business logic, as you've probably seen throughout the labs we've done, it's very broad. The last lab we just walked through, someone might call that an authentication bypass, or they might call it like a privilege escalation attack, or it could get categorized in so many different ways. And like you're saying with SQL injection, there are ways SQL injection could be exploited that was due to the logic of the application. So it's a little interesting searching on there, but it's definitely a cool place to check out and learn more. And once again, like I said, modern security tooling isn't effective. I already kind of mentioned this before we started, but these are some of the big names within dynamic security testing tools and static. You might recognize at least one of the names on here. But these are all kind of the big players generally. And pretty much all those labs we went through, none of these tools would find a single scenario of what we did, because they don't understand the logic to find those vulnerabilities. And just like you said, sometimes it's even questionable calling it a vulnerability because you're abusing something that the application intended for, but you're using the functionality in a way that the developers would not like. Fun little interactive let's talk moment. Does anyone have ideas on how we could prevent business logic vulnerabilities? I know there might not be any software. What is that?
Expensive developers.
So don't just hire a bunch of like foreign overseas ones.
It always comes down to have security involved from the get-go. And there, my current client, we mandate a pen test be done before any application actually goes live, which is something I haven't seen before, and it's nice to see.
So when you say any application go live, are you saying a brand new application or anytime they push new code?
Specifically brand new.
Okay.
It would be best if like any code is released, but to be frank, that also gets down into a lot of expense and also a lot of process slowdown.
Yeah, and I think it really depends on the functionality. Like Netflix, they're pushing out tons of new code every day. And it's not realistic to ask, do a pen test before every time you push new code. Some companies are not pushing new code that often. And the severity or criticality of the functionality they're pushing out may be limited or very high.
But it also depends, like if you're a payment provider, okay, what is your risk acceptance level and what system are you touching? Are you touching, so I saw like on there there's a strap vulnerability. Are you pushing code to your API that accepts transactions, or are you pushing a marketing website?
Right. Yeah.
An easy thing just putting time, time in your logic. Nobody can sit there and figure out how to exploit it. They spend the next 5 seconds doing your tricks. The session times.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of that.
That's really hard to enforce. A lot of times web applications, or more specifically, it's usually happening at a web application firewall. Controls like that are being implemented. A lot of times it's referred to as rate limiting. But basically, a lot of times, you might set up rules on like your web application firewall to say, if someone sends 10 requests within a second, let's block that traffic, right? Now, where it gets tricky is, what is that web application firewall validating on? So we just talked about all these issues in validation. These security measures that validate what you're doing also have the same issues. So is it looking at your IP address? Probably, that's the most common. So, IP rotations can be kind of difficult, but even within the HTTP protocol there, sometimes you can just append headers to the request to trick the underlying infrastructure, what your IP address is. So you saw those headers, right? You saw like user agent, you saw the host header at the top, you see a cookie header for your session. There's headers like X forwarded for, where you could supply an IP address, and there's several other refers too. Maybe it's looking at the refer, or say you're doing like SQL injection. Maybe the web application firewall is validating on your input and it sees a bad SQL query, but maybe if you give it like URL encoding on the payload, or supply the payload twice, maybe you can get it through. Maybe it's validating on the user agent. You just have to change that. There's ways to trick web application firewalls. Honestly, I don't think there's like a one shoe fits all to fix these. It's a game of cat and mouse, and I think cybersecurity will kind of always be that way. We'll find ways to implement solutions to stop some vulnerabilities, but attackers are going to find ways around them. Things are just going to keep changing, and it's just a big game of cat and mouse. But kind of what we looked at in the beginning of the presentation, some of the causes of business logic vulnerabilities, I think it's very important to ensure you have proper data validation. So if it's a phone number field, validate it's 10 characters. That is an integer. There's no reason to allow a string of text. I might not think of a way that can be abused.
So,
yeah.
I hate what you just said.
Do you?
Yes.
That's unfortunate. Why
US
is that?
defaultism.
What is that?
US defaultism.
Yeah.
10 characters.
That's on a German, if you type somebody, if your customer's in Germany, that's not on their phone.
Yeah. So maybe you select the country code first and then it validates based on the country
Exactly.
code selected, right?
Yeah, it was just more what you said, it being 10
Yeah.
characters there. But
Yeah.
like, what Nick was saying of, what is your country code?
Yeah.
There, and then, okay, now we've got a country code, then we follow the defined regex pattern, or like.
Yeah.
One, that's just frustrating, and it's just more frustrating there, but, oh, your email must be .com or something. Like, okay, you got that, and you're showing that you have other input validations on there, putting your best foot forward.
You'll
Yes.
never get like all your input validation perfectly right, but you can make things that fail safely and you can address those features
Mhm.
as they come up, because someone from Germany can't register, like, okay, cool, that's a problem that affects one person.
Yeah.
Boom, you go fix it. I think you just need to threat model, features to some degree, even like a 30-minute discussion being like, okay, well, where do we, in a world where we don't have unlimited budget, so like the real world, you say, okay, well, our admin panel or whatever functionality, if we're building that from the ground up for whatever reason, what is the risk if this gets pwned? And so you focus on that.
Yeah.
You focus on things like your payment system or, your gift cards, whatever, because that's financially related. And you figure out what the business risk is associated with each of those things. And so then even if you just say, okay, what should expected user input look like? And you cause some sort of error. If it doesn't look like that, you can always go and fix that. But if you're hemorrhaging money, like that's a way bigger problem than saying like, hey, sorry guy in Deutschland, like you can't buy this right now.
Yeah, it's a very complicated subject. And yeah, don't take the 10 characters too literally, because like you said, there's going to be various phone number formats.
Yes.
You could be literal on saying it probably needs to be an integer because we allow strings. Maybe if we allow a string, maybe we introduce SQL injection like you're talking about, whereas that shouldn't be possible in a phone number field. But yeah, and also that's a very tricky thing when we try to tell our clients how to fix solutions, especially on like lows or medium kind of severity findings. For criticals and highs, it's kind of like, here's a very bad problem. You guys need to fix it, and it's kind of obvious. But a lot of times when it comes to resolving vulnerabilities, there might be a negative kind of business convenience type of thing to it, right? You might create, let's say there's a weak authentication mechanism, and we suggest to create this big, strong authentication system, and it creates an inconvenience to users using the application. The business might not like that. And we're like, hey, here's this bad vulnerability. The business is like, no, it's about our users. Like, I don't know if you've ever tried to encourage people to use multi-factor authentication, but it's a nightmare because people don't want to do it. But that's that's also part of the game of the cat and mouse. And that's why we keep exploiting very easy issues, is because the conveniences of businesses that don't want to put in full solutions. Yeah.
So
And it's extra overhead on the development team. And yeah.
I did, I can talk more about it later, but one of the vulnerabilities I did years ago was against a big email security company.
Mhm.
And it was effectively a business logic fault, just misusing or using their application.
Yeah.
And I had to fight with them for half a year to fix it. And their response was, well, our customers like that our application is broken.
Yeah.
And we don't want to fix it. It's like, well, I can spoof and pass security for all 30,000 of your enterprise customers right now. But which one is this at this point?
Yeah, it's tough, and it's just
And that was the problem. It was super critical, but also there was legitimate use cases for the, it's not really a vulnerability, but for the logic flaw being there.
Yeah, and I'll try to keep this quick because I know we're already a little over time, but like a scenario where I'm kind of seeing a constant security control issue that people don't want to fix is PDFs, because within file upload mechanisms, just about everyone allows a PDF file, and they're generally assumed to be safe. Now we know that they can be sketchy, but the issue with making them sketchy is that it's very easy and antivirus products do not catch it. So like, say cross-site scripting, where you're injecting malicious JavaScript into an application in a way that it can reflect back to a user dangerously, whether it's stored on the server or sent through like URL parameters that you can send a link to someone. JavaScript can be dangerous. It can be used to steal credentials, privilege escalate, get malware fetched onto people's machines, redirect them to your malicious domain. There's a lot of stuff you can do with JavaScript. PDF support JavaScript. When you fill out a PDF form and you put in your data, and maybe you're filling out like an insurance form or something, a lot of times we intentionally have JavaScript in PDF forms so people can use them.
Can execute on
dynamically, yeah. Now, so JavaScript is pretty much always allowed in PDFs. I've actually never seen anywhere where it wasn't allowed by default when you're uploading a file. I've never seen like, oh, you can't upload this PDF because that's JavaScript. I've literally never seen that. So I have PDF files that have JavaScript payloads to do cross-site scripting stuff, like redirect people to my domain that has malware. Redirects are the biggest thing. You're a little limited on, say, like cookie manipulation because it doesn't fully interact with the application. A lot of times it gets executed based on the software they're using to view the PDF, maybe the browser or Adobe Acrobat. Maybe you can exploit Adobe Acrobat like a CVE in it based on the JavaScript you're supplying. But essentially the vulnerability exists for like everywhere, but nobody wants to fix it because we want to allow JavaScript in PDFs.
So that's really bad for like healthcare domain.
Yeah, it's bad for anyone. I mean, the critical, kind of categories like healthcare, financial institution, government, those are going to be your biggest risks, of course, but that's why you see sophisticated red team tactics probably using PDFs quite a bit, because that is how you get through the radar. It's like because you can almost always get those through, and you can social engineer people with them. You can have PDFs that make user fill out a form that sends data back to you. So I could be like, what's your bank account number, your bank password, and upload this file on maybe a banking application, and someone is able to retrieve that file there and they think it's legitimate because they got it from the website, but it's not. We kind of went down a rabbit hole there, but that is the end of the presentation. Thank you guys for listening to me blabber a little bit. And are there any other questions before you guys get any more upset with me from taking away from free beer time?
No, but just as an incentive, right? Your tab is on us.
Okay.
Future speakers know that if you speak in person, we take care of you.
Cool.
Virtual speakers need not apply for free beer. Virtual speakers need to apply for presentation.
They get virtual.
Yeah, from the sanctuary of their presentation location that they supply.
Also, virtual attendees, if you guys have any questions, now's your time. Or anyone can reach out to me afterwards too, Chandler Johnson, or if you just look up like OWASP Knoxville, you'll find me.
So I have to ask, what's OWASP stand for? Because I only see like Anglo-Saxon Protestant.
Interesting. Wow. So it stands for Open Worldwide Application Security Project. I think everyone thinks it stands for Open Web Application Security Project, but that's not the case. It's Open Worldwide Open Worldwide Security Project. It's very well known for its top 10. You'll always do like OWASP top 10. That gets pushed out every 3 years. It's basically the top 10 categories of vulnerabilities that security researchers are finding. They have a top 10 for web applications, mobile applications, APIs. So it's not just for web applications, it's really for anything application security. Web applications is their main focus, but they do a lot of research and discussion on mobile stuff, APIs, and they're even getting into kind of AI and like LLMs and like chatbots and stuff like that now, which is interesting. But they're just kind of a industry standard for security practices and publishing good information for developers to know. Anything else? Questions?
Questions from our virtual audience?
All right, well, thank you guys and look forward to the after party.